So, welcome to the final lecture of the energy system modeling. And today's topic is going to be roles of stakeholders in energy systems and these control measures that can be implemented, something about the markets and policies. So we'll try to understand the roles of the stakeholders and how to integrate them into the models. And we're going to explore the technical and market-based control measures and to some extent analyze these policy frameworks and their impact on energy system. And we're going to be moving on a rather generic level. I'll try to throw in examples, and I have some calculation examples that will hopefully shed some light into these. So the basic structure of the energy system as we have defined it in this course is as such that it always incorporates some kind of an energy source. There's a conversion, transmission. You might have a storage. This is optional, but usually whenever you have inertia in the system, that could also be considered as a storage. And then there's the consumption. And in large-scale energy systems, you have the primary energy as fossil fuels, nuclear, solar, wind, so forth, the biomass. And you have the conversion plants. Then you have the transmission and distribution, and the final energy is consumed by, for example, transportation, industrial sector, and residential. So the overview of these key stakeholders in energy systems is that you firstly have the government and regulators. So they are the ones to set the policies, give the incentives to change the systems, and regulation, for example, related to carbon pricing or emission limits and so forth. So that's the EU legislators and the national parties that adjust the laws and regulations. Then you have the utilities and energy producers, the ones that provide the energy and also maintain the grid. So grid management, investment in renewables and market operations. So they have to kind of take care of the system. They have to uphold the system in a way that there is, for example, Fingrid has a lot of this grid management, and the power plant or the energy producers rather, they invest in nowadays in a lot of these renewable power plants and so forth. And they conduct the market operations in a way that they produce the energy for the markets. Then there's the consumers and communities. So they consume the energy. They have the ability to conduct, for example, this demand response. They are the ones that determine the energy efficiency of the system. To some extent, also the utilities and energy producers, of course, as well. And they also nowadays have this decentralized generation. And the next one being technology providers and innovators. So they are the ones that build the power plants or produce the technology, do the R&D. So lately, they have been focusing a lot on developing these renewable solutions, storages, and smart grid technologies. There's also other ways to kind of look at these stakeholders. For example, here is an example of taking into account how the value chain is related to here. So, for example, the landowners is included in here. Consumers is the same, distributors, So these utilities and energy producers can be divided into different categories. So in there, there's transmission system operators, producers, and distributors are a separate stakeholder. So you might get into a bit more detailed definitions through these value chains. But if we'll look this definition that I gave you in a bit more thorough way, what's the role of government and regulators, for example, in this Finnish energy systems? So this Energiavirasto, and this työ- ja elinkeinoministeriö, so Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment and the Energy Authority, they set policies, and the point of those policies is to balance the economic growth with the environmental targets. So they have to be aware that we have the kind of long-running policies related to energy security, that we meet the demand, but also we need to meet the environmental targets that are set by, for example, EU. And they provide the incentives for increasing these renewable energy sources. They regulate market operations and ensure energy security. If we are investigating these low renewable systems, these kinds of government parties and regulators, they have been focusing on maintaining stable supplies of these traditional energy sources, so nuclear power and fossil fuels. And they have had this kind of a well-established regulatory frameworks that have been supporting this centralized energy production. But nowadays, we are moving towards these high energy systems, and the policies that we implement, they promote more and more of this distributed generation. Rooftop solar, wind farms, so forth. So the consumers are turning into energy producers as well, so prosumers. There's also this smart grid investments. So since the energy system is being more and more distributed, you have to have a bit more of this control and these smart grid solutions implemented. And there are novel ways like dynamic pricing and support for community energy projects that are being introduced in various countries to strengthen the system flexibility. So the utilities and energy producers, what's their role in Finland? Major utilities like companies like Fortum, Teollisuuden Voima, and grid operator, as we know, Fingrid, they play a central role in this energy reliability. So there's a lot of companies, these are just to name a few in Finland. And in low energy systems, it's again been, they have been focusing pretty much solely on promoting nuclear and fossil fuel-based energy sources. And the benefit of that is the stable, predictable output. And that's why we call them dispatchable units in our energy systems. And in the high renewable systems, there has been a shift towards the renewables. So there is kind of diversified portfolio of these energy sources. And one thing that has affected into this as well is the public acceptance. So from the markets, the utility companies are getting signal that you have to invest in more renewable to be able to cope with the competition. So the shift towards renewables, it requires utilities to manage a more decentralized network. There are smaller and variable generation units. And that's why nowadays these virtual power plants are being a thing. Let's see if I have if I can open the link from here. There's a definition that you can go through in a bit more detail. What is a virtual power plant? But essentially, it's a portfolio of these distributed energy resources, including consumers. So it's not just production, it can be consumer. And the consumers can have this consumption flexibility. So small scale renewable energy power plants, storage batteries, on-site battery storage, fuel cells, and so forth. And if you're talking about the effect of virtual power plants, they have the same effect as the traditional centralized large power plants, but they are aggregating these assets together to make a bit more stable production and consumption portfolio. So these are the kind of, since there's a lot of decentralized production, this is required to maintain the stability in the system. So these utility companies that are providing the energy are combining their assets, aggregating their assets together, and that's called the virtual power plant. Then related to technology providers and innovators. So what's their role in the energy system in Finland? A lot of the companies have made this kind of a R&D work to develop new technologies. In Finland, there has been a lot of R&D related to biomass utilization. There's been some related to, for example, wind turbines. And in here, I have an example, since we are a northern country and there's a lot of icing on the blades during the winter time. Some Finnish companies have been developing these blade heating systems. So there's a blade heating element that protects the blade from icing in the critical. So that is a placement in the wind turbine blade that you don't have to cover the entire blade. It's rather the only critical part in here. So heating of the complete blade is not reasonable nor efficient. So that's why you have certain kind of passive elements in the blade that can be used to remove or prevent the icing. And then there's this active elements that can actually remove it rather than just effect that it's not forming in there. In low renewable energy systems, the innovation or research and development has been mainly focusing on enhancing the efficiency of existing nuclear and fossil fuel plants. So actually, at the moment, we have the technology to make really efficient fossil fuel plants. For example, if we're talking about combined cycles, gas turbine combined cycle, where there's the heat recovery steam generator. The efficiency of those systems, for example, in Germany, has gone over 60%. So over 60% efficiency from fuel, chemical energy to electricity. So that's an astounding achievement in on itself. But since it's the natural gas that has had some turmoil due to the Russia and Ukraine war, and overall the kind of moved outwards or elsewhere from these fossil fuels, then those fine achievements that have been made, they are not, in my opinion, utilized to the fullest. And also, if we're talking about these kind of ultra supercritical coal power plants that they utilize, for example, in China, because of the CO2 emissions and move towards outwards from the traditional fossil fuels. Europe hasn't been utilizing that technology to its full capacity. But either way, we have a lot of this kind of a legacy technology from these low renewable energy systems. In high renewable energy systems, the rapid expansion of these renewables, it's a significant driver in the innovation. And there's a lot of this grid management forecasting tools, decentralized control systems, and so forth related to this. So it's not just the production technology, it's also the grid management. And there's a lot of collaboration between these technology startups, universities, and established industry players that we are a part of as well in our university. Then there's the consumers and communities. And in Finland, the households and businesses, they are both energy consumers and increasingly so-called energy prosumers. So a prosumer is a kind of a previous consumer that has the ability to produce some of its own energy, and it can also provide it to the network as well. So generating part of their own energy via rooftop solar or participating in demand response programs. And we were talking about in relation to this energy storage systems about these batteries that are being offered to Finnish households and these block houses. And then there are larger energy communities such as the Lemene. So in Lempäälä, there's this larger energy community that I think in a case there was a kind of a grid or the system malfunction, they could be to some extent at least self-sufficient. So they have battery energy storages, they have solar production, they have fuel cells, they have these gas engines, and there's a lot of infrastructure that's being built in Lempäälä related to this project. So you can see it right around Idea Park, the solar fields, and we looked at the storage system in the lecture previously. So consumers have had a rather passive role traditionally. So most energy has been centrally produced and distributed, and that's why our networks have had a certain structure. And nowadays, since there's a lot of this kind of spot production from these variable renewable energy sources, it's been a problem to the network, at least somewhat. So in high renewable systems, consumers are encouraged to become active participants in energy management. So I'm not sure can in Finland or is in Finland this statement true that we are being encouraged, but at least the kind of energy producers offer these certain kind of tariffs for the so that they purchase your energy to the network. I'm not sure if the contracts that they are offering are highly beneficial for the consumers, but either way, there's a way of kind of decreasing your own energy bill, and for a consumer, that's an incentive enough in on itself. And then there's the financial institution and investors as well in Finland. So what's their role? For example, Finnish banks, investment funds finance these energy projects. So this risk assessment has to be tailored to long-term returns and environmental sustainability. So that's again about the market or the public acceptance. That's this environmental sustainability is related. And you might have heard, if you know the Finnish word vastuullinen, that's a kind of a gimmick word that's being used in a lot of these commercials that are advertising, for example, these electricity contracts. So there's the share of wind power owners on the total kind of a production portfolio. So you can see there are some foreign investors. Actually, a lot of the Finnish wind power is owned by foreign investors, and there is a rather diversified kind of investor portfolio in here. So wind power is one that has been kind of diversifying this base of ownership of these energy systems in Finland. In low renewable systems, the investments were largely channeled into established nuclear and fossil plants and it was a bit more predictable revenue compared to the one that we can offer today for these companies. As you have noticed from this course, we have gone through, at least to some extent, for example, the cannibalization of the wind power profitability. So if you have a lot of wind power, it kind of pushes everything else out of the merit order group. And then since the marginal price of wind power production is pretty much close to zero, then the energy price is driven low. So whenever there's wind, the price of electricity is going to be low. And to some extent, that's why the wind power increase most likely, and it to some extent has been kind of stagnating. So it's I've heard from some analysts that they say that this wind power generation is on ice until there is like meaningful consumption of that low priced energy from the industry. We'll see what's going to happen. So this increased variability of renewables necessitates new financing modes. So there are these kind of green bonds and public-private partnerships to manage this risk and encourage innovation and also this investment. So since the revenue stream isn't as secure as before, there has to be these financial models. So one thing that's been implemented into these evaluations are this sustainability criteria and these long-term decarbonization strategies. So that is the mind of the markets, mind of the consumers, that these have to be taken into consideration. And I have to say that I've been seeing this in the master's thesis. So a lot of the master's theses nowadays are being focused into this life cycle assessment. You're calculating the carbon footprint and the carbon handprint. So how much carbon emissions can you reduce? So that is a central part of the master's thesis nowadays. And we have this LCA course that teaches you to manage this SimaPro calculation tool by Hannele Auvinen. So she is the person who is teaching that in our university. So how can these stakeholders, how can they be integrated into these energy system models? To some extent, we have been doing these already. So they can be integrated into energy system models by representing their behaviors, decisions, and influences through various of these modeling techniques. And in Finnish context, where this government policies, utility strategies, and consumer behaviors, investment decisions play a crucial role, since we have a bit of a turmoil in our energy system. So there has been strong changes. then these models must incorporate both technical and these socioeconomic dimensions. So these some of these approaches, these are a bit on a general level, but I'll try to, as I said, I'll try to give some examples on these. So scenario analysis and policy simulations. You can use agent-based modeling, integration of socioeconomic modules, optimization models with stakeholder constraints and objectives, hybrid modeling approaches, and feedback loops and dynamic adaptation. So let's dive in and see what these actually mean. So the scenario analysis and policy simulation. In here, you can define multiple scenarios representing multiple different policy choices. Also, there can be different regulatory frameworks and market conditions that are being taken into consideration. And I'm thinking that I promised the module assignment 4 to be released already, but I've been having a lot of trouble kind of generating a meaningful assignment for you. And I'm thinking that it might be related to this one. So there is a way of making this different kind of scenarios and how to say, and to calculate how do these scenarios affect to the convergence of the energy system. The convergence with that, I mean that we are heading towards something, and what that something is going to be, that can be modeled. And there's, for example, this Markov chain can be applied into here. So you'll have to kind of determine this kind of a Markov chain matrix. And the numbers behind it, you can just arbitrarily drop them as I've made in my example. But there's also something behind those numbers that you have to determine. So we'll see, let's see if I have the capacity development in here. No, not that one, but the policy one. In this Markov chain matrix, what it kind of resembles is that you have certain kind of probabilities. In here, there's, for example, nuclear, coal, gas, wind, and solar. And each one of these numbers represents, for nuclear to stay as nuclear power, it's going to be 80%. To transform into coal, it's going to be 10%. To transform to gas, 5%, wind and solar, and so forth. And all of these can be given this kind of a probability value. And this represents a certain kind of a system, whereas if there is going to be a higher push towards renewable energy, then we're going to emphasize more of these transfers towards renewable energy sources. And if I run this scenario, what it's going to give to me is going to give me a figure on how the market, or rather the energy production portfolio, is going to develop. So this was, in a say, dummy calculation that we had 100% of coal in the beginning. And what's going to happen based on the two different scenarios, this baseline, it's going to converge into a certain level, whereas the higher renewable push is going to drive it downwards. And there can be these kinds of, since my background is in modeling chemical kinetics, this looks a bit like intermediate products from in this chemical kinetics calculations. So there's a certain species that peaks up as a kind of an intermediate product. So the gas power in this strongly policy-driven system. So it peaks up high, but then it starts decreasing again. So with these kinds of scenarios or with this Markov chain, you can analyze to some extent where the system is going, but the difficulty lies in determining these numbers. So you have to be able to kind of resolve the interdependencies of these various energy sources. And this is going to be somewhat on a general level. So you cannot say it as with an accuracy of one single power plant, for example. It has to be on a general level. But there can be these trends that you can derive from the historical values and also the policy targets that are being set. So this kind of a scenario analysis can be utilized to incorporate these policies. So for Finland, you might simulate scenarios where the government introduces dynamic pricing, increased renewable subsidies, or stricter emission standards. And for example, in this, to some extent, you did this in model exercise or model assignment rather for 2. So where I said that Finland is acting as an island, and you had to make kind of decisions on what energy sources to emphasize. So that's kind of the prelude on making, for example, this kind of a Markov chain matrix. So this helps to illustrate how changes in government regulation or market incentives alter the investment decisions. There's also how the technology adoption is being progressed in the markets and how the system reliability, in this case, for example, the electricity production reliability develops. Agent-based modeling. Models individual stakeholders, utilities, consumers, investors as agents with distinct decision rules and interactions. So the interaction is the key in here. How do they interact? In a Finnish energy model, utilities could be modeled as agents optimizing grid operations when there's different kind of renewable output, and consumers might be modeled to respond to real-time pricing signals. So, for example, this pörssisähkö. So the when the price changes, the consumers respond. And this kind of a modeling approach, when you have these agents, it captures the heterogeneity of or stakeholder behavior, or rather of the stakeholder behavior and the emergent system level effects from this individual actions. And there is some kind of an agent-based model that I tried to generate as an example. So in here, what I have is a system where there's government, there's the utility, and then there's the consumers. And the electricity price is the one that is affecting the consumers. The government regulates the subsidy levels. That is going to some extent, affect the price and also the renewable share. There's also some randomity in the utility renewable share, but whenever the government sees that the utility renewable share goes up, they are going to decrease the incentive. So that's how the market works. But in this scenario, there's multiple different calculation steps. So it kind of sees how these subsidies fluctuate. And to some extent, this is actually what has happened in Finnish energy markets. So at least in the last decade, there was some kind of bouncing actions in the subsidy systems. And the consumers, whenever they see a higher energy price, they are going to decrease their consumption to some extent. But again, this is a rather arbitrary example, and then there's the kind of interlinked the interactions. So the government towards utility, they adjust the subsidies, utilities to consumers, they provide the energy, government to consumer, they influence these prices through the subsidies, and utility to government, they report the renewable share, so the government can make decisions based on the renewable share. So all of these agents have their own kind of distinct behavior and effect to the energy system, and that's their interaction. So this, I'm always trying to make these examples in a way that you could understand them in the context of this lecture and within the time frame as well. So this isn't per se a very complicated example. So the real agent-based models that they are utilizing in these energy system studies are much more complex. But there's just some kind of an example on that. So more stakeholder integration into energy system models. Integration of socio-economic modules. So you could couple technical models, so optimization or simulation models, with socio-economic components that account, for example, market behavior, investment risks, and policy impacts. And in Finland, this might involve integrating models of consumer demand response, investment decision frameworks for renewable projects. So this has been done in the context of Finland. And market clearing mechanisms reflecting the Nordic energy markets dynamics. So this would provide this kind of a holistic view by linking this technical performance with economic and behavioral factors. Then there is the optimization models with stakeholder constraints and objectives. So developing optimization frameworks where these stakeholder objectives, such as minimizing costs and reducing emissions or maximizing renewable share, are explicitly included as constraints. And to some extent, we did this in this exercise that Excel exercise that I provided you with we did the Monte Carlo simulation of trying to determine the battery size for the system. So we minimized the usage of fossil fuels by introducing a battery into the so-called microgrid system earlier in this course. And for example, this optimization model for grid operation in Finland could include constraints on regulatory limits on emissions, incentive mechanisms for renewable energy, such as I showed in the agent-based modeling. So there's a subsidy that increases when the renewable energy share decreases. Or contractual obligations with consumers. So they have to be able to provide a certain amount of renewable energy, for example, to the consumers. And actually, the energy companies are have made this kind of a contracts with customers. What else? Hybrid modeling approaches. Combine deterministic simulation models with probabilistic elements that reflect these uncertainties in stakeholder behavior, such as in the market prices or consumer demand patterns. And this consumer demand patterns is something that we also modeled before. So you are somewhat familiar with this. An application of this could be using this Monte Carlo simulation to incorporate uncertainties like fluctuating renewable output. And to some extent, I guess we did this, but I'm still going to emphasize this one more. And in the exercises, I want to utilize this Markov chain for wind power. So this, let's say, wind capacity factor. And there's an example what I managed to do. I first did it in Python, but then it looked like it's like a black box again that you might not understand it, what it means. But for wind, if you have the wind kind of profile for a certain area that you can get, for example, from the Copernicus database, now you have the kind of skills to use that. This Markov chain, what it does, it classifies this behavior of this wind, because if you want to make Monte Carlo simulations of this wind production, you don't just want to make random numbers in there, because that's not how wind behaves. This Markov chain, what it enables you to do is to kind of characterize the behavior based on changes in the wind velocity. Now we have an hourly resolution. So what I have done here, I have classified different classes of wind speed from minimum to maximum, and there are the different classes. And then I can say, oh, this is wind class number 5, and the next one is wind class number 5. So now we can see from class 5 to 5, so it stays the same. In here you can see from 5 to 6 and 6 to 5. So those are the possible changes. So this Markov matrix, what it enables you to do is, let's take that out of the way. What it enables you to do in this case is to see what is the probability of wind velocity class number 2 to stay as class number 2, 69%. Well, to move to class number 1, 0.07%. And to move, for example, to class number 7, so to fluctuate crazy, so to make a crazy jump, it's 0%. So now when I have this kind of a behavioral matrix, I can use this Markov chain to produce a novel wind profile. And you can see that the orange is the colors are in reverse in here. So the orange is the real wind, and you can see that there are these kind of a discrete changes in here. So you'll see that, I'm going to zoom in here a bit. So you can see there's a fluctuation in the wind. So whenever I do this kind of randomization again, let's see if I can get it to work. Now you see the profile changes. So I have an infinite amount of profiles that really closely resemble the load duration curve. Now you can see the different classes because I have 10 classes. I made the load duration curve based on the Markov chain generated wind profile. So that's the orange one in here. So the colors are in reverse here. And this is the actual one. So now you can see we have wind profiles that actually really well characterize what's happening in the real world, but there's a possibility of making this time series that provide wind at certain times where the reality in reality there wouldn't be wind and vice versa. So for that, we'll see tomorrow how we can utilize that. Let's see this. Repeat the name of the course. The LCA course. It was Hannele Alvinen's. Now the students have actually gone that course, might be a bit more knowledgeable on it. But if you type in Hannele Alvinen and LCA and TUNI, you are sure to find it. That what they are using is this Sima Pro program. Yeah. So hopefully that answered your question. So, so that about the hybrid model approaches, and then there would be this kind of a feedback loops and dynamic adaptation. So implementation of this dynamic feedback mechanisms where stakeholder decisions affect system performance. And I think this is something that was to some extent seen in this agent-based modeling. So there are feedback mechanisms that the utilities kind of report their renewable amount, and one stakeholder being the government adjust the subsidies based on that. So to some extent you have been using these different stakeholder integration methods, but it's beneficial to categorize them also. So what kind of control measures are being used in energy systems? There are market mechanisms. These control measures and market mechanisms are these two components in the management and optimization of these energy systems nowadays. And they have to work together to make the grid stable, reliable, economically efficient. So that was the kind of trilemma of the energy systems. You could make it reliable, you could make it cheap, you could make it environmentally friendly, and you can choose two of those. So how to kind of balance between those three? What kind of control measures can be utilized? There are technical controls and there are these market and regulatory controls. So technical controls, for example, relate to frequency and voltage regulation. If we're talking about the electricity grid, of course, you can have such technical controls for example, the district heating system. You can have such controls for the gas transmission networks, but they aren't related to frequency and voltage regulation. They have their own kind of characteristics. And in here, for example, you can think about energy storages being a technical control measure and demand response. So market and regulatory controls, they include these dynamic pricings and the time of use tariffs. So in essence, this could be just pörssisähkö, so the market priced electricity. Capacity markets and auxiliary market service markets, subsidies, incentives, taxation, and the integration with energy storage and demand response. So why these control measures in energy systems are needed is because we are moving from this early decentralized systems, so small scale, isolated self-sufficiency, low efficiency, and low level technology systems. So that was in the kind of 1800 or the rather 1900 and early 20th, so 19th century and 20th century. So then there was this move towards this centralized energy system, so highly industrialized production and larger scale and so forth. And then we have this distributed energy system. So that's what's been happening now, diversified, small range, renewable, clean, flexible, low emissions. But what we need to move towards even further is the smart and controlled energy system. So smart, interconnected, so that's where the sectoral integration, for example, comes into play. Digitalized, data-rich, so there's the Internet of Things and big data, or as I like to call it, big and messy data, and high efficiency. Personalized, so that's why we need these technical controls and market and regulatory controls, because we are moving towards a system that's highly kind of let's not say chaotic, but if you don't have the control measures, that's what it's going to be. So technical control measures, there are real-time measures that help maintain the balance between supply and demand in the electricity network. So frequency regulation ensures that the frequency 50 hertz stays in the wanted limits, 0.1 hertz plus minus. And these are automated systems, and they are there's legislation and regulation concerning these frequency and voltage regulation. Then there's the load balancing and real-time grid management. So grid operators use this control system. I put a link to this SCADA, so you can see what it means. So supervisory control and data acquisition. So that is something that you might be familiar. So kind of a key attribute of this SCADA system is in its ability to perform this supervisory operation over a variety of proprietary devices. So there are certain levels that this SCADA can go through to make this supervisory operations. So this includes managing these kinds of ramp rates of power plants in the electricity system to respond to sudden changes and in demand or supply. And I'm talking about mainly about this electricity system in here because this smart and connected energy system, the base of it, the heart of it, in essence, is the electricity system. Because that's kind of the fastest one to respond. And there's the largest amount of data, and it has to maintain the balance, unlike in a second level, unlike with the, for example, the distributed or the district heating systems. And the district heating systems, they are isolated from one another, but the electricity systems are highly interconnected, and they have the highest kind of resolution, the need for the resolution in terms of balancing it out. So that's why we have a lot of these mechanisms related to this control in the electricity system. So these are the reserve marketplaces in Finland and what they do. So there's this, for example, fast frequency reserve. So this responds in seconds. Then there's the minute scale, 5-minute scale, and 15-minute scale kind of restoration kind of services in the grid. So there's a lot of these reserve marketplaces, and they have been increasingly utilized in these or examined in these master's thesis nowadays, that how to make profit out of this one. So if we have a system, can it operate under these market or in these markets and get possible revenue out of it? These demand response programs, they allow consumer to adjust their electricity usage in response to grid conditions or price signals, and this can be done in automated way. So the electricity company can provide you a service in which that they control, for example, certain parts of your heating system and so forth. So automated systems or manual interventions can reduce consumption temporarily. Then there's the energy storage as control tool. So this is something that you are more familiar since we already had the lecture on this. So storage systems, they can absorb this excess energy during low demand and increase it during these high demand periods. And related to this demand response, how much demand response do we have? Well, Fingrid they have a really like open data policy, and in here you can see how much, for example, demand side flexibility exists in this day ahead market. So this is an estimation, so not all the assets are available all the time. And then there's the intraday, so there's the spot and LBUS market and these reserve markets, kind of day ahead market demand response, intraday market demand response, and then there is this reserve market. So there's a lot of different services that can be utilized to balance this network. And when talking about demand response to customers, for example, Helen provides this kind of a service. So you can go into this website to see. Okay. There seems to be a lot of trouble with this Zoom system now. Just going to check that my recording is on. Yeah. Sorry for the trouble. I'm not sure why this wants to quit all the time. So with this Helen page, let's see this one. So there is some kind of a instructional for the companies on how to utilize this demand response and how much profit you could make. So for example, reserve power unit that can be started up according to need, greenhouse lighting system that can be disconnected when necessary. So they provide incentives in the form of money. So the customers can get better contracts if they offer their systems for this demand response. Then there is this dynamic pricing. And this was a bit of a pickle since a lot of the kind of literature referred to this dynamic pricing to be kind of the same as time of use tariffs. But the way I understand this dynamic pricing is that it's this time of use tariffs means that, for example, this pörssisähkö, so the market price-based electricity contract. So you know the prices in advance, but there might be some difference in the consumption prediction for tomorrow and the realized consumption of tomorrow. So that's why the price of production actually changes. So if there were some mechanism that the consumers might see what the real-time price is, they would be able to kind of adjust their systems accordingly, or it would have to be done automatically. Otherwise, it would be a really kind of up and down bouncing system. So we'll see an example on this dynamic prices. So incentivizes consumers to shift their usage to off-peak times, and especially when the kind of prediction of consumption and production goes wrong. For example, in the case of wind power. Capacity markets and auxiliary service markets, they ensure that there is sufficient generation capacity. So this is kind of a long-term system. And these capacity markets, they don't exist in Finland in this sense. That's what we talked about, that the marginal price is the one that is the kind of determining factor in the electricity price, and you don't get anything from the capacity. There is this tehoreservi, so power reserve, but for example, at the moment, there is no power plants that are being utilized in that reserve. So that we'll see if that changes in Finland. So related to this dynamic pricing, I made an example that there is this system where you have the day-ahead demand. So this would be the profile of the day-ahead demand. So you have an estimation how the day-ahead demand behaves. And then you have the intraday demand. So this is the actual kind of, well, at least an updated version of the demand profile. And that has changed. So that's why when there's more demand, the electricity price would be higher. Now, if the customers were to see this, so this has been predicted yesterday, and the prices have been set yesterday for the spot system, but now today, if we see that, okay, there's a clear difference in the prediction and the realized, soon to be realized load, then we could signal to the customers that, okay, the electricity price is going to be higher. So some of you might be able to do the demand response, or the respond to this dynamic pricing. So the actual load after that would go towards the original prediction. So this would, of course, affect to the electricity price of the production and so forth. But how to manage this? This would have to be an automated system. And so this would be this dynamic pricing code. So in here you can see that the I have predicted that the load is just a sine curve, but then I put some randomness into it. And based on this load profile, there's also the price profile. So less consumption, less price. But now, since there is fluctuation in the demand, then it causes fluctuation in the marginal price of the production. But due to this dynamic pricing, so some of the customers will adjust their consumption based on the actual current price, then will drive this red curve towards the blue one. So that's the green curve in here. So it kind of levels out the fluctuations in there. But that's not a system that's being offered now, and it would have to be automated in a sense. Otherwise, it would be really chaotic. So dynamic pricing and time of use tariffs. So then there's for the market-based and regulatory controls, we're going through that. So one aspect of it is the subsidies and incentives, taxation. So governments and EU legislators can use financial incentives such as subsidies for renewable energy installation or tax credits for efficiency, energy efficiency measures. So they want to influence this investment decisions and market behavior. And then there's the integration with energy storage and demand response. So this is something that you are more familiar with. So the arbitrage. So you load up the system, the energy storage system when it's a low price, and you utilize it when there's a high price. So that levels out the system kind of fluctuation in terms of both demand or the consumption and also the price. And related to this taxation, you have the carbon pricing. So the CO2 price has gone soaring upwards during the early 2020s, and now it's been fluctuating at a level approximately 70, 75 euros per ton of CO2. And then there's the carbon dioxide emission factors that so in cooperation with this carbon pricing and these emission factors that are set to certain fuels, they drive the system away from these highly carbon dioxide intensive production or the fuels rather. So you can see that the natural gas most likely is going to be, or would have been at least, the kind of intermediate solution for our energy system decarbonization. But due to the ongoing war, the kind of future of natural gas is a bit unsure. And then the incentives. What kind of incentives have been put into place? So this would, in essence, for example, in the Markov chain matrix, in this policy, you would have to adjust these ones. So how likely it is that coal will be replaced with wind? Well, it's going to be much more likely if you have incentives. And that was the kind of initial path of this Finnish wind power generation or evolution. So this feed-in tariff became available in Finland in 2010, and approximately 100 million euros were provided to subsidize renewable energy. So there was solid biofuel, so wood chips and wood fuel, anaerobic digestion, so that was related to biogas production, and then wind energy. And this was the one that started growing the fastest. So it makes it profitable for this novel type of renewable power producer or renewable power source to kind of break through into the markets. But then in 2017, the system was full, so it was around 2,500 megawatts. So part of them are still receiving this support. So feed-in tariff is still active in Finland, but there are no new participants that can enter the system, at least in terms of wind power. If there's some novel new system, for example, the hydrogen production, in the future, it might get some incentives as well. So while these technical control measures, they operate in real time to manage grid stability, market mechanisms provide this longer term economic signals. So this demand response would be a way to balance the system like within the 15 minutes or within the hour. But these market mechanisms is something that you're going to have to go through to see what happens to the system, like in this sense, in a long run. So in 20 years, where it's going to level off to. And those kind of numbers in the matrix, in the market matrix, they would change every year. So they would be varying also. Dynamic pricing, for example, it not only encourages consumers to shift load in real time, but it also signals the investors for the kind of potential profitability of energy storage and demand response technologies. So in that sense, it's a long-term solution also. Both aspects, they contribute to the overall flexibility of the energy system. So the ability to kind of withstand the fluctuations of the renewable power production and also the fluctuation of the consumption. Flexibility can also mean that, well, resilience is a bit more kind of long-term goal, but it's also going hand in hand with the flexibility. So, for example, this wartime has affected the Finnish energy system and it's tested our resilience. Technical measures, they ensure immediate response to these disturbances, while these market mechanisms, they tackle this long-term goals. And they have to be integrated effectively. Otherwise, they won't make too much of a difference. This integration is the way to decarbonize the energy system. Something about the policy framework still. So we went through what kind of stakeholders are in the energy systems. We went through how to integrate them into the models. And then we saw what kind of control mechanisms, these technical and market mechanisms, affect to the energy system, and to some extent how they can be also implemented into the models. And then these policy frameworks, what do they mean? They include the set of laws, regulations, incentives, market mechanisms designed by governments and regulatory bodies, for example, in EU, to guide energy production, transmission, distribution, and consumption towards, for example, the carbon neutrality goal that we are now going towards. They typically contain these regulatory measures. So, for example, standards for emissions, efficiency, safety. So that is going to be the cornerstone of reliable grid operation. Then there are incentives and subsidies that we just saw. So financial supports, tax credits, feed-in tariffs, grants to encourage investment in these low carbon energy sources. And then market-based influences like carbon pricing, emission trading schemes, and dynamic pricing models. I think this has a rather negative connotation, emission trading schemes. Maybe emission trading systems would be a better word. Not like you're cheating somebody. So policy effects, energy system performance indicators. So this is something that I actually talked with Tuomas Vanhanen. He's making his PhD at the moment on this kind of a, it's related to policies and how do they drive sectoral integration, for example. So policy affects energy system performance indicators, and that if you're thinking about, you have the physical energy system in here, and then you have the actor decisions that change the physical energy system. Then you have to measure it. You have some kind of performance indicators. You have the costs and you have the emissions, for example, and they also drive the actors' decisions. So they affect how the actor decisions are being made. If you have systems that are operating with poor efficiency, you are going to try to go away from them. Then there's the policy decisions that we are now talking about, and there are the regulatory and policy frameworks that was on the previous slide. The market environment, and they both affect to the actor decisions. And also these performance indicators, if there's high emissions, for example, they are going to be met with some stricter legislation, and then it's going to trickle down to the actor decisions, physical energy system changes, and then it shows in the performance indicators. So that's the kind of route it has to travel, the change. And then there's also the public opinion. And that affects to these policy decisions and actor decisions. And also these, if you have a lot of smoke in the air, so that's the Kuznets curve, then it's going to start also kind of affecting the public opinion, and the public opinion that shifts in the long term what's going to be happening in our energy system. So the state of the energy system, or the energy system in on itself, is such as the public accepts. If there's going to be some kind of a turmoil in the system, then the public opinion is going to start shifting, and then you're going to see some changes through these policy decisions. But as you can understand, that's a long route. It's going to take years to change the energy system. So now what we kind of put into action through this public opinion in these policy decisions, it's going to affect a long time. And you better be damn sure that it goes to the direction that you actually want it to go. And in here, if you're talking about these regulatory and policy frameworks, this is the European climate law related to this Fit to 55, or is it Fit for 55? So 55% net emissions cut by 2030 compared to 1990. Climate neutrality by 2050. So there's a ton of these different laws and regulations that determine in which ways we are going to transfer the energy system. So these regulatory and policy frameworks, they are going to affect the actors, and they are going to affect the physical energy systems. But there's a certain time frame where the legislation kind of mandates that you have to change the system. A good effect, for example, is the sulfur, SECA, sulfur emission, this control areas that in the maritime industry, you have to change from high sulfur fuels to, for example, natural gas, or you're going to have a scrubber. And that was something that happened a few years ago, that a lot of the ships sailing in the international seas started to require these scrubbing systems. And that's when the technology innovators and providers came into play. But yeah, this is just to show that there's a lot of legislation to take into account. So the impacts of these on energy system modeling and operation, these policy frameworks, they have several different and indirect impacts on this energy system. Investment and technology adaptation. So you have clear policy signals to reduce uncertainty, encouraging private investments in renewable storage and grid modernization. So that's for the risk reduction. Innovation incentives, grants and subsidies drive technological advancement and integration of smart grid solutions. And for example, this just mandates, for example, with the sulfur emissions that you have to reduce them, then it drives the technological advancement through this obligation, mandation. Then transition support. Policies promoting renewable portfolio standards and decarbonization help shift energy mixes away from fossil fuels. And again, then you're going to have to change these numbers. So there's a lot of information in these. So these are rather arbitrary numbers generated by AI, but it goes to the kind of right direction. But how to kind of see that it actually is going to the direction that we want, we need those models. Then there's the operational market dynamics. So what are the impacts of these policy changes or frameworks on this energy system modeling and operations? You have to have the grid stability, so regulations on frequency and voltage standards, coupled with market mechanisms like capacity markets, which Finland doesn't have, ensure that energy systems remain stable. So that's why we're going to have to see this. And this was the power reserve, tehoreservi, that we have. So we have to have a stable energy system in times of turmoil. Cost allocation, carbon pricing and emission trading schemes or systems shift the cost of externalities to producers, influencing dispatch decisions and operational strategies. So you are all the time seeing that different energy systems and energy networks are moving away from these carbon fuels. So there's more and more of this taxation and mandation that is kind of pushing the shift towards the renewables. And when there is the renewable energies, when the renewables emerge, now with the help of this course, you're going to see, or you're going to know what it also needs. It needs these regulatory systems, for example, the energy storages. Demand response and flexibility. So time of use tariffs and dynamic pricing incentivize consumers to adjust usage, which can affect to this grid stability. So these policies, let's see in here, regulatory and policy frameworks, they can affect to the actor decisions in a way that we're going to have physical energy systems that can manage this demand response, and then it's going to show in the performance indicators. We're going to have lower or at least more stable costs. And if we're talking about the complexity of the energy systems, now this is kind of the system in on itself. So in here we have the physical energy systems, and if we go deeper into the energy system, there's the energy prices and resource availability. So we have domestic sources and imports. And then you have all the kind of actions that are being done by the utilities to provide the energy, and they are going to affect prices, they are going to affect the capacities. Then there's the final energy that is being utilized by different sectors. They have their own costs. So you can measure energy flows and emissions, and it all affects to these, for example, gross domestic product. If you have low energy prices, that can promote certain industries and increase the GDP and so forth. So there are so many kind of interlinked systems in here that it's impossible to see the system functions without this energy system modeling. And the final kind of effect of these policy frameworks, integration into energy system modeling. So how you can integrate these policies into this modeling. So modeling different policy scenarios, so aggressive renewable targets versus gradual transition. So that's what I was trying to kind of show in this policy modeling. And again, the devil is in the detail. Now you can see the kind of arbitrary outcome of the outcome of this arbitrary system, and you would have to be the one that digs up the data. So how fast, or rather how probable it is that we are shifting from coal to nuclear, how probable it is that we are shifting from coal to biomass. So you have to have these scenarios, constraint modeling. So this is something that is, in my opinion, easier. So incorporating policy-driven constraints like emission caps or renewable mandates into optimization models that help simulate real-world operational changes and investments. So emission cap is a good way, or renewable mandates, or let's say the sulfur oxide emission control systems. And then there's the feedback mechanisms. So policies often evolve based on system performance. So that's why you always have to have a certain kind of feedback. You have to have in the models the measurement, and then based on the measurement, you have to be able to make changes. So in this agent-based modeling, for example, we have the possibility of in here, the utility changes the renewable amount, then it gives that as a feedback to the government changes the subsidy levels. So that's the interaction of the different agents, feedback mechanisms. And in essence, in this course, I've tried to kind of, let's say that we have been moving across this kind of a board. So to understand energy systems, you have to be able to understand and make at least some kind of calculations on this unit or at least this plant level. And then there's the kind of supply chains that we have been going through. So there have been, for example, the electricity supply, electricity transmission, to some extent, distribution of district heating and gas networks, and then comes the larger scale energy models, so where the energy economics is taken into account. So in my opinion, this is a really good figure that I found from this article that I've been referring to before as well, modeling and simulation of energy systems, this kind of review article. And actually, what I have drawn before for our energy and process engineering studies at Tampere University is that we are the energy and process engineering kind of major. So what we are teaching is the micro level. So we start from here with the molecules, the kinetic gas theory, for example, how they different kind of molecular structure, how it affects, for example, the heat capacities. Then you go into phenomenon level, so thermodynamics. How does pressure affect a certain system? How does temperature affect a certain system? Then you go into the process level. You have these unit processes, and then you chain them up to more complex systems. And then you go into production distribution, so production systems, distribution systems, and then you have the system level. And that's the kind of overall energy system that we have, and the kind of interlinkings of those systems, the sectoral integration that we've been talking about. So we have the traditional fuel or energy providers, and then we have the consumers via electrical grid and district heating, for example. And this is the traditional way. And then you go to the electricity market. But due to the fact that we have renewable energy and energy storages nowadays, it causes fluctuation. So the customers are being turned into these prosumers, so production and consumption altogether. So the money is that matters for the consumers. We have to incentivize them to make these smart decisions. Then sectoral integration, heat pumps, electric boilers, they come into play and kind of mix up the system. Traffic starts to use more and more renewable electricity. We have electrolysis that comes into play with the industry and also with the traffic. So the emerging hydrogen economy, how this biomass can be utilized in industry, and how can biorefineries product value-added products into here. For example, hydrothermal liquefaction that we are have been studying in here as well. And then there's the finance market, decarbonization, and the legislation. So there's the mix that you have to take into account in this energy system modeling. And that's why we started from really small systems and advanced to larger and larger systems. So what this course covered, we had the basics of the energy systems, what elements did they contain, and some calculation techniques as well. And then there was the introduction to energy system modeling and the scenario creation. We went deeper into consumption modeling, production modeling, and storage modeling. Then we looked at renewable energy sources and how to model them, wind and solar, more specifically. And then there was the energy transmission and distribution, so the gas networks, electricity networks, and district heating networks. Dynamic modeling of the energy system, so what dynamic aspects can be incorporated into these models. And then was Anna's lectures, so insights into modeling large-scale energy system models and these applications and practical examples. And now I'm trying to kind of conclude this course with this final lecture. So you have the idea of what kind of stakeholders you have to take into account, what control measures and this markets and policies come into play. So tomorrow and on Friday, we still have the calculation exercises, and I will try to provide you with the model exercise 4, and you have a quite decent time to complete those tasks. So still the project work, if you have something to ask, I'll try to answer. If it's about spine up, then I don't know how to answer. I'll relay the message to Nina and Justinas. And about the Moodle exercise, as I said before, in the calculation exercises, you're going to have plenty of time for that as well, since we are only in the beginning of April. So this concludes the lecture series. I thank you for your attention, and hopefully this was a course that provided new insight and know-how for your future endeavors. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll be seeing in the future in other courses.